So there are, and as it's indicated here, 4 city-owned operated parking garages. There is the Fayette Garage, the Washington Street Garage, the Madison Irving Garage. There is also the Center Armory Garage, which is technically owned by Sura, but operated by the city. And then there's also the Harrison Street Garage, which is owned by the city, but operated by the Marriott and their management partner.
So who's responsible for maintenance, the operator or the owner?
So for kind of everyday maintenance, the Marriott and their operator are generally responsible for it. If there are capital improvements, I believe our lease references, that the city has some shared responsibility with that. But for day-to-day maintenance, that's on the Marriott and their operator.
And the other one the same?
And for Sura, that's essentially the city. So Laz Parking that operates our garages is the responsible party there. I will admit, councilors, there's a number of directions I could have, we could go in the conversation. So there may be some follow-up materials I can provide. I just received a financial statement from Laz. I'd be happy to share that with the council. There are engineering reports that I could provide that might be helpful. We have a parking garage rate survey that looks at what other garages through the city and through downtown offer that I can provide afterwards. I will mention that one of the parts of the budget this year is a proposed increase in parking garage rates. Right now it's at $90 a month. We are proposing $100 a month. And that for us, the parking garage rates have not been increased. I honestly don't even know the last time they were increased, but I don't think it's been since we've been here, at least not since COVID. And looking at what other garages charge, we think that we're not going to be the most expensive, and we don't want to be, but we also, want to be somewhere in the middle.
We've had that conversation before about being the floor of the market, to allow for whatever potential benefits people will assert to that.
Sure.
That shift from $90 to $100, where does that put us in terms of the market? What is market rate? And I'll let you go there before.
Yeah, so I know it. It varies somewhat. So I know that I think the Barclay Damon Garage. I think the AXA Garage now is about at 110. Which we no longer are involved in. Thank goodness. I think the Barclay Damon Garage is higher. From memory, I think it's about 150. I'd be happy to send that to you, counselor, so that you can see. We've tried to put this so that we're again, we don't want to be the most expensive one, but we do think that it is. We want to stay somewhere in the middle.
Are we in the middle or are we the floor?
I don't know that we're alone on the floor, and so and I can pull up the email that Kendi had from Laz, because we had asked Laz to really look at that last year. So there is, I'm looking at the Treasury Garage is 150, but there are other Jefferson, Clinton Street Commons, appears to be below. Galleries Garage is below us. So I don't know if we're absolutely the floor, but it's also, and I can dig into this more about, what's their accessibility? Are they only open certain hours? Whereas right now we're operating 24 hours a day, which is a benefit for monthly parkers. Council had just approved, and I appreciate the extension for the agreement with Laz, and we are actively working to get the RFP out, putting final touches on it. So I anticipate that going out, if not later this week, then very early next week.
Before it gets released, can I take a look at that?
I'm sorry?
The RFP, can I get
So yes, issuing the RFP for the manager of the garage, and we've made Laz aware of it, and, they're mindful of it. And so, we really want to, it's been some time since we issued an RFP last. And so we want to reissue it. And obviously conditions have changed. When we issued it the first time, we still owned AXA. We didn't have the cameras installed in the garages. And so on-site security was still something that was necessary. We also didn't have the revenue control equipment, all of those things that the council has been supportive of. And we appreciate it because we think it's made the operation of our garages more manageable and also more appealing to folks that are parking there, that they're, because of those things, we're able to have the garages open more often.
So the new RFP will reflect all of that.
So a new RFP, yes, a new RFP will reflect all that. And that's what we're just doing the final touches now to make sure, because we started with the last one that we issued, but making sure that there's no, lingering information in there, that it's all updated.
Once you finish it, can you send it to us?
Of course.
Thank you.
Well, I had a question
What's
about the garage that was closed across the street from the hotel. Mm-hmm. Is there an update on that?
Yeah, so that's the Hotel Syracuse garage that the city doesn't have any interest in, but it was a combination of, I think, primarily driven by code enforcement. We were, who in cooperation with Pat Monin, who's our parking garage supervisor, had driven through there and we had gotten repeated complaints about security. I mean, because if the garage is open, you either need to have on-site security there,
Right.
or you need to have enough camera coverage and somebody monitoring those cameras all the time. That's
The
a,
structure is sound, right?
yeah, it was not structural. The other issue, so in addition to security, was just sanitary conditions of the garage. We were getting multiple complaints about human waste, trash, just throughout the garage. And, I would imagine that that's tied to the security question. And so we had many conversations with the manager of that property to say, this is not a structural issue, which oftentimes is the reason garages are closed. This is something that, in our estimation, we think is manageable. We manage it in our garages, but the conditions to improve the conditions, it was not met, and so we closed the garage.
But
It's not safe.
We can look into the future, considering getting somewhere else
Yes.
to take, and we can reopen it.
I think
I
there's
mean,
negotiations and.
I think there are some conversations,
Good.
Counselor,
Good.
about a new ownership structure for that garage.
So it would be safe to say that the profit margins of the parking garages are either breaking even or we're losing?
I think it did. So I think for the operation of the garage, I think there is, there could be a slight profit, but I think that's not taking into account some of the capital expenses. And so, which is just something that we have to do in order to maintain the garages, to keep them safe. I'd be happy to send the council a breakdown of the capital expenses by garage in addition to the operating expenses, so that you can have a bit more of an apples to apples comparison, which is another reason why we brought Laz on, because at the time we were working with two different operators who had two different accounting systems, and now we have one operator across all of our garages, so it's much easier for us to compare garage to garage, month to month, how they're performing.
Would it be safe to say that we can kind of critique the enforcement of using the parking garages, because you want parking garages are used for more long-term state purposes versus off-street or side street parking? Would we limit the amount of time that we would put on the meters for people to park there to help enforce going to the parking garages, or how can we balance the profit margin from the meter profits versus the parking garage?
Sure. I mean, I think some of this is awareness. I think sometimes, and I know the downtown committee has raised this concern, and I just recently saw a presentation that they had made a request to SMTC to take a look at signage, because I think many people don't know which parking garages are available to the public and which ones are only for employees in that building or only for monthly parkers, because oftentimes we do get, I wouldn't say oftentimes, sometimes we get questions from people saying, hey, I work downtown and it's really expensive for me to pay the meter all day long. And we're like, well, that's because you're not supposed to be paying the meter all day long. We would prefer you, if you're going to be here for, the entire day, to be in a garage. And sometimes they're just not even aware of which garages are available for them to use because the signage isn't great. And so although technically parking garages are no longer in my wheelhouse, encouraging Connor to reach out to the downtown committee and see how we can support their efforts to try and make the wayfinding for garages easier, and to make employees aware that, if you're working downtown for an extended period of time, here's a garage that, it doesn't close at 5, so you don't have to worry about that. We have security, we have somebody monitoring all the cameras, to make sure that there's a presence in the garage. And that's a viable alternative to having to park on the street. So, and to that point, we've also explored, and I know Connor's leading the effort with this, to look at the pricing of our parking meters, because there are municipalities, and I believe we have this functionality to make the pricing dynamic. So maybe we make it more expensive to park downtown around lunchtime, which is when we know everybody's coming down here, as opposed to, later in the day or earlier in the morning. Or maybe we try and push, there are municipalities that would maybe make it less expensive to park on a business corridor on James Street than downtown, to try and,
why don't we expand where the parking meters are?
and I think that's another piece of it, Counselor, is also expanding where the parking meters are. And I know that Eric Ennis and Connor and Matt OJ have been engaged in conversation because development is obviously shifting. So there are areas like the Inner Harbor, like East Genesee Street or East Fayette Street, where there is more development, and whereas metered parking might not have made sense 5 or 6 years ago, but given the development in those areas, it makes sense for us to maybe install some new meters.
And also, people think, well, we're making a money grab here because of the parking, but in reality, we're making sure parking turns over.
Right, trying to
And
encourage
it helps
turnover.
the businesses, actually.
It does.
Instead of having their bartender park right outside the bar. or
Right,
something,
which
they get
I-
customers doing.
Right, which I understand is sometimes, as a business owner, it might make sense. Why can't we just allow my employees to park on the street? And the question is, well, where are your customers supposed to park? So, again, and I think a lot of that is just awareness and education and allowing people to know where they can park.
Corey,
What was
since
the
you brought
total?
up the meters, question for you, because in this town, you hear everything. They're saying that the guy that does the parking meters, that he's no longer with us.
The guy that repairs our parking meters has been retired,
Oh, okay.
and that position has not been filled.
Okay. That, I wasn't aware that, was it Jason? Jason Cook? Okay, I'll find out.
I believe there's only one guy doing it,
Okay,
to my knowledge.
okay.
And I've noticed that the one that repairs them, there's still a lot of broken meters around.
Okay.
There was one outside of City Hall that the guy tried to use the other day when I was leaving, and I told him I'd vouch for him if he were to get a ticket. So, but
Yeah, okay.
it's just things like that. Even though we have convenience of
Right.
parking around here, I just want to make sure that
Okay. We try to identify those proactively with our, collection partner, to when the person goes to collect if they see that the meter is broken, to let us know. And also, through the Sears City Line app, people can report that meters are broken there. But I'll follow up with DPW and find out.
You send what our revenue is
Sure.
from the parking meters?
I also noticed that majority of our handicap titled meters are the older style versus the newer style. Is there a reason for that, or?
If there is, I don't know what it is, so I can find out.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
they're the single, I'm assuming maybe, yeah, I'm not going to guess. I'll find out why the single meter ones are more likely used with ADA spaces.
Sorry, Councilor Jones-Rousey, you've been waiting patiently.
Be fine. I just wanted to know, what was our total contract for LAS, and how much revenue do we bring in? Because I was just trying to figure, although we passed it the other day, the 1.5 million that for 6 months. What was,
So I
what do we
think-
get for that?
Jen, I think the total cost is
We did not.
1.5.
Oh, it's held. Oh, okay.
1.5 million is
Good,
for the
'cause I was-
entire
I was
contract
wondering.
for LAS. The total cost. I thought it was about 1.5. Is that right? About 1.5? Yeah, so that's I believe that's the annual cost for LAS to operate our garages. Does that include the shuttle as well? Shuttle is separate. Yeah, so 1.5 for LAS to operate our garages.
Okay, so times 4, and then what is the?
Well,
what-
so that's all of the garages.
No.
Oh.
I'm just adding in my head.
Gotcha.
You said annual.
Yeah, that's not per garage. That's the total cost for the entire year for them to manage all 4 of our garages.
1.5. So why are we doing an extension for 6 months for the same price?
We'll have to go back and visit the letter. Yeah, it shouldn't be the entire cost if we're just asking for a 6-month extension. So okay. All right, we'll revisit that letter.
Okay, so I don't know if this has been talked about. As far as updates and repairs of our parking garages, I know, I want to say maybe 2 years ago, we probably were talking about that, including the security cameras and all that. How close are we to the 100%?
So in terms of the security cameras, they're all installed, and we have employee through a private security firm who is monitoring the cameras, and they are activated by motion. So I think that helps make sure that we're keeping an eye on where people are in the garages. And then the revenue control equipment has also been installed. So all of that work has been completed. There are some structural repairs that are. This summer we did a tremendous amount of work at Center Armory Garage. I believe that work is wrapping up. And then we have some work planned for the Washington Street Garage. I know engineering isn't in the room right now, but I could certainly provide to you the timeline and the list of repairs that will be made in the Washington Street Garage. Those are really, and then there's ongoing work at Fayette as well.
No, would there be, so 2 questions. Would there be increase to the budget with now improving the security cameras and the lighting and all that stuff? Would there be any increase to that? And what's the operations increase for that?
So to my knowledge, we don't anticipate any changes to the cameras or the revenue control equipment now. I mean, I would imagine that there's some money in the operating budget for repairs here and there, but if we were to do some sort of wholesale overhaul, that would be in our capital budget, and so it wouldn't be in the operating budget. So, but I would imagine that there's some money put in for, if we have to replace cameras or...
And that footage goes to the cloud, or how is that?
Yes, I believe all of that does go to the cloud. I can find out, though. I know that Pat Monin and Dave Proeck are often in contact with each other just to make sure that everything's operating, but that's my understanding.
Okay.
Corey, did we ever have, I think we did in the past, having shuttle service,
Yes.
with the buses? I wonder if that's something we can go back into?
Sure. So, Counselor, we do now have a shuttle service for employees that runs at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day to take them to the Washington Street Garage. So that's operated by LAS now. But is there a different? Is that what you're referring to, or am I missing the question?
I was referring to that, and I remember there was a shuttle service at the stadium, and I don't know if that was for city employees or maybe it was up the hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
There would be a lot of vehicles, and at the end of the day, they'd be picked up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was for Crowstow, so I didn't know if there was any lots that are available, maybe center in the city,
Mm-hmm.
that we could use, like a regional market or the stadium, or is anything available?
Yeah. So we've
Schools.
explored.
Yes.
We've explored. If there are other alternatives uses for the shuttle, since it's operated by LAS, there was some talk, I know, last summer about could we use that during festivals to, encourage people to park at the Washington Street Garage, and then there's a shuttle down to the Inner Harbor, or there's a shuttle down to City Hall or something for folks who might not want to walk the distance, but that way we're providing parking to them. I don't know where that conversation left off, so I can certainly follow up there.
Yeah, I was curious because
Yeah.
I know, like at the Walgreens, they have a big lot in Eastwood for some. If we had regional and they could pick them up at a certain time, that would alleviate a lot of the things.
You're right. And as the construction with 81 continues, a lot of those parking lots that are right now located directly under the viaduct are
Right.
going to become not usable.
Yeah.
And so there might be an opportunity for us to take advantage of the shuttle that we run to, maybe partner with another organization.
How much use does that shuttle get?
I haven't asked for the numbers lately, but I can absolutely find out and send a report on the usage of the shuttle.
Last you had updated me, you told me that we had roughly a solid 15 individuals of ridership.
Yeah, I would imagine that is likely. I think just
I did the math out on that for you. If we do 365 days, 5 work days out of the week, we're assuming no vacation days, right? We get to 260 work days. We multiply that by 30, which is 15 people each way. We get 7,800 rides to and from the Washington Street Garage. That is about $13 per ride. We could give people an Uber gift card, and it would be cheaper than running the bus as we do.
Yeah, I'm open to ideas. Again, the shuttle originated out of conversations with CSEA, who had pointed out that they had, there's limited parking around City Hall, particularly for people who have limitations or mobility concerns. And so, they had asked us to explore an opportunity for, for a way to get employees to City Hall in a safer manner. And so that's what we propose. But that doesn't mean that that's what we have to do forever and ever. So, and I think, Counselor, that's an idea that also has been batted around in this kind of global parking garage conversation that Connor has been taking over in terms of, is there an alternative way to do this?
And I have one more question for you. And I'm not, we talk about revenue, right? And this is just my little harebrained idea. I've been throwing it out forever. Because we know that almost every school district in the county comes to that square to take pictures, things like that. And I've actually thrown before that maybe we can look at charging a set rate for the school districts because you have to put police out there. You have to, we need to do something to kind of better control that.
Okay.
And if it's going to be fair, we need to charge every school district a certain amount of money so that we can pay for those police officers.
Understood.
I think I'll jump in.
Okay.
I had a busy day at the school district, but I wanted to come down and talk about my favorite topic. And I would say that out of the entire budget book, I find this to be the most troublesome couple pages.
Okay.
And, I have 2 pages of typed up notes, a handwritten note with all of my arrows and boxes that I know people love. And it just seems completely overwhelming. And at the same time, the 2 big boxes I have that everything flows out of are, what is the strategy for parking, overall strategy. And we had met as kind of, I don't even know what to call it, a parking task force or a parking working group,
Yeah.
whatever,
Sure.
whatever term we put on it. And that was back in September. And then nothing happened. We talk about the RFP for LAS, which, we heard was coming over a year ago. And we look at a budget that has a gap of about $34 million between revenue and our spending. And we cannot cut our way to a better city. I think that everyone here recognizes that, we need to spend money to give people the amenities that they want to be able to live here, comfortably and enjoyably. At the end of the day, here is something that we're completely just, it's passing us by. We're a year later and we did nothing. And when I talk about the strategy, parking, the issue got brought up on this side of the table, the relationship between our garages and the curb. And we don't think about that relationship. I can give you a fundamentally simple question. That is, what will the impact of parking on the curb be if we increase rates in the lot or in the garages? And not a knock on you,
No.
but you don't have the answer because
No.
we don't think about the global system. We think about them individually. And I know Councilor Hogan has, kind of revived talks about an authority a little bit. But it just seems like we are completely missing the mark. And I'm not even going to go down the road of enforcement, which, is a different conversation for a different day. But that's, another huge issue that we have, not only in terms of revenue that we're completely foregoing, but also in terms of quality of life. People, I can only speak for my neighborhood and there most often, people parked across the sidewalk. People parked on both sides of the road. People parked the wrong way. People in loading zones. People in no stopping zones. I can't, drive 1 block without finding an illegally parked car. And I will, add to that statement, I can't get to City Hall without finding an illegally parked car with a ticket. And I think that's, I don't even know where to begin with my multiple pages, but this is something that we need to figure out and we need to do so with urgency. And it doesn't seem like we're giving it the urgency that it really needs.
And I will take responsibility for the lack of urgency. And as much as you were looking forward to this conversation today, I'm thrilled that Connor is on vacation and I'm taking this meeting. Whereas I thought, moving into a different job, I was going to be able to let parking garages go. So Connor, I hope you're having a great vacation. No, I think you're absolutely right. And to Connor's credit, he, has brought together some of the internal partners to try and put some, to kind of answer the question, where do we even begin? And I think, figuring out the dynamic between, on-street parking and what Flowbird, the folks who have the technology that monitors our on-street parking, what can they offer us and how can that speak with our parking garage operators so that, to your point, there are more connections. I do think, not to knock myself, I do think Connor's mind is a bit more well-suited for that than perhaps mine was. And so, I don't disagree with you that there needs to be more of a sense of urgency because this is a source of revenue for us. I know that, parking tickets is also something that has certainly come on to, been brought more to the forefront. I think in part because, as dynamics have changed, we might keep going back to the same well, even though not getting the same results. We can't keep expecting SPD uniform officers to be the ones writing the parking tickets. We can't, on nights and weekends, we can't keep expecting that to happen because it's not going to happen because of the staffing challenges and the changing nature of police. Like, there are other things they need to be doing. So we need to be finding the alternate resources, and I know SPD, this is on their radar, of filling the vacancies that they have for parking checkers, maybe deputizing other folks to, I think Neil Burke would chomp at the bit to be able to write.
I've told you that I would love
can
to
the-
as well.
Can the
Can
parking
we
checkers
outsource?
issue parking tickets?
Yes, they do. And I know that SPD has, it's difficult because parking checkers, it's an entry-level position, and you're basically subjecting yourself to getting yelled at all day long,
So can
What's
we
that?
take the?
Deputize me. I'll
Yes,
do that.
well, and so, and I think, and not to say that SPD has been at all resistant to that, but I think that's what we're really coming around to is, we can't keep just saying, well, it's SPD, it's uniform officers, it's SPD, it's uniform officers. They have other things they need to be doing.
WPW, they can issue tickets.
I don't know that they can issue parking tickets. I know they can issue tickets. We went through the whole thing with private snowplow operators, that DPW can issue tickets if those folks are found to be dumping snow on sidewalks and in streets. But, again, I know Neil Burke would love to be able to ticket folks that are found to be parking across sidewalks, especially at construction sites or, downtown with just, I don't think people maybe don't do it intentionally, but, from an ADA standpoint, that's a real problem.
So what would be the parking checkers like shift, for instance? I mean, how does that, what does that
I
look like?
think they are, and this is the conversation that we're having now. I think, I don't think it's a secret. They generally work, the 9 to 5 shift. I think they're limited in terms of the time after hours or on the weekends. And I know the auditor did a report I think it was last year, highlighting some of those issues that, we need to be working on. We need to be staggering our parking checkers, going to the neighborhoods where we know it's an issue, because although it can easily be dismissed as revenue generation, it's also a safety issue for, people. The visibility is reduced, public safety trying to respond to something. It's
Quality of life.
quality of life.
And we
I
can
mean,
also, and, I've seen them before, the CSOs out
Right.
there doing this and parking. It says parking authority.
Yeah.
I mean, to Councilor Williams's point, if we could have just coalesced everybody together. We still don't know. I know CITA through, economic development's offered deals on parking to the garages as part of drawing people to downtown businesses. And increasing, where we put parking meters.
Yes.
But we have to, yeah. And it's not that, and you're right, it destabilizes neighborhoods when constant double parking.
Sure.
Especially, and it's incredibly dangerous, especially up on the east side.
Oh, yeah.
Tip Hills.
Tip Hill, you can hardly get through.
Right.
Well, I
Let me
don't
ask
want to
you-
park, listen, I don't want them ticketing on my street, but that's okay. Other streets are okay. No.
Right, but no, to yours and Councilor Williams' point, we had that parking, working group. We met once. I'll put it on me that we did not meet again, for the rest of the calendar year. And I know that Connor has been putting effort to kind of gather information internally of, what exactly should be the outcomes and the action items of that group, but I think it is time to bring us back together again and agree as a group that these are the things that we're going to work on. I'm sorry, Councilor Paniagua.
I just wanted to, I'm going back to the parking checkers. So there was a report, I think issued by Alex Marion.
Yes.
That I think I read. It said that they could issue tickets, or they did issue tickets up to 1 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something we can change?
Yes, I think that's what we need to be looking at, is that illegal parking is happening on the weekends, it's happening after hours, it's not just downtown between 9 to 5. And I know the parking checkers know that, I know SPD knows that. Right, no, absolutely. And, and I love Exo Taco as much as the next person, but if you drive down that block of East Fayette Street between 4:30 and 7:30 every night.
I was there yesterday.
I love that
Okay.
place, but there's cars on both sides, and if I'm on my way home and there's a Centro bus coming, like it's very dicey of trying to get through there. So,
And who's responsible for supervising this operation with the parking?
for parking checkers, that's the Syracuse Police Department, and that's right now it's Sergeant Romaine who's wearing 7 or 8 different hats, and so
Different but related conversation.
right,
Yeah.
and so but we're
So how can we make that more effective?
So we've started conversations with SPD to talk about, filling the positions that we currently have, looking at perhaps some supervisory support, the position that we could create to help support Sergeant Romaine, because obviously he's got a lot on his plate, and so to organize all the scheduling and all that is perhaps a lot to ask of him. And so those conversations are happening now with SPD. The directive was clear from the mayor as part of the budget process that parking tickets, again, not just it comes up as part of the conversation because it is a revenue source, but to everybody's points here, it's not just about revenue, it's about quality of life, it's about safety, it's about visibility, it's about parking across sidewalks and pulling out of your driveway and not being able to see because there's cars everywhere. And so, those conversations are ongoing, but, I'd be happy to, report to the council as those conversations continue.
So just on that, the Exo Taco whole situation.
I'm sorry. I love Exo Taco. I do.
Where does the planning commission fall into play with that as far as per number of seats that you are going to have inside and the parking outside? Because I know for some businesses that those parameters are set in stone, and are we looking at that as a whole?
Yeah. I think part of it too is changing people's expectations. Like, when I go to Exo Taco, it's not, I do.
So taco.
I know. I'm sorry, Exo Taco.
Everybody's
But it's
gonna
a
be
great
at Exo
example.
Taco.
But it
can
is a
all
great
relate.
example that, if I don't find parking on that one block of East Fayette Street where it is, then I'm going to Foreman to see and I'm always able to find parking on Foreman. That means I do need to get out of my car and walk around the corner to East Fayette Street. So, it's this perception that if there's not a parking spot available immediately outside of this place, then I'm just going to park on the wrong side of the street. And I think it's trying to, through enforcement, through education, to condition folks that there is parking available. You might have to walk a little bit farther away, but again, I regularly park on Foreman because that's where I can find parking to go to Exo Taco.
Then you also run into the new place across the street, the Overcue's Deli as well.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so, through increased enforcement, to make that stretch safer, hopefully we can condition folks that, parking on the wrong side of the street is not the answer. The answer is to find legal parking someplace else.
That lot on that corner.
The vacant lot with the
That's
fence.
a good next to the church? Or,
Yes.
Next to XO.
No, next to the church.
so there's
Oh, I see
Exo Taco, then the church, and then that lot. I'm not sure who owns that vacant lot.
No, what's his name?
I don't know, because maybe that could be parking.
Sure.
They use it for
I
parking.
think it's
Is that not what's his name?
Ivory.
And then it was the car wash.
John,
John Ivory. Is that his
I
name?
think it's John Ivory.
think it's,
That's before Exo Taco, right? I park there a lot
Yeah.
when I go
I
to
mean,
it.
we're talking about revenue. And
Sure.
We're talking about that a lot. You can find out who owned that lot.
Sure.
Maybe it could be a revenue generator.
What's that face?
No, I'm just thinking maybe it's a lot I should buy or something.
Oh,
like that,
yeah.
you know?
Right on Almonds.
Yeah.
Well, it's about to be
Yeah.
developed
Yeah.
as well. Not that lot. It's going to wrap around.
Can I redirect us parking garages
Sure,
for a minute
yeah.
and bring up a really awkward topic that got a little buzz around
Okay.
City Hall for a little while, a couple months back. 125 full-time employees park in the Fayette Street garage every day. If we have a shuttle that doesn't have ridership, why are we foregoing the potential income and revenue at the Fayette Street lot?
Sure. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say this is the only way to do this. One of the challenges in One Park Place are the type of employees who are there. So we have, 40 some odd code enforcement officers who regularly need access to their vehicle. So for them to, is there a time aspect of them having to wait for the shuttle and take the shuttle down to Washington Street Garage to go to their the inspections that they make throughout the day? So I mean, they need regular access to their vehicle. Police and fire have a number of folks that are there as well who arguably need regular access to their vehicle. And I think it's a challenge for us to then say to code enforcement, we don't have enough city vehicles available, so you are using your personal car, and now we're going to charge you to park in the garage, even though you don't have any choice because you have to use your personal car in order to do your job. It's just and these are some of the conversations that I know Connor has been leading internally of, is there a better way to do this? Because, it's not for. We have tried to limit the folks who are parking in the Fayette garage to either folks that are in, a leadership position, folks that need regular access to their vehicle, or folks who need some accommodation because of physical limitation, which generally that process runs through HR so that we can make sure we have some documentation of that. So,
is the number reduced at all from where it was?
I don't know off the top of my head, and I can find out.
And I'm just going to throw it out there. We lost our parking with no notification, and we, come and go. But
Understood.
now we have nowhere to park.
Understood.
And just to piggyback on that, I spoke to Connor about that. So are we going to put signs up over there?
I don't know the answer to that, President Hudson. I will find out. Again, I'm really glad that Connor's not here today. No, I apologize that I don't know the answer to that. I will find out.
Because, all those spots was media, which one, like I told
So
Connor,
those spots, yes, I believe Connor does have plans in place to change the signage across the street.
Okay, because my thing is this, most of us are running in from a job.
Understood.
So we need to be able to make easy access to the building.
Completely. I understand.
Or we can do.
We also vote on the budget too, so.
Yeah, I might have waited until after the budget to make those parking changes, but I certainly don't want to tell
that's
anybody how to
okay.
do their job.
Or we can do a switch.
No, but don't change the ones that's already
What's
there.
Connor's
Right.
title
No,
again?
we won't. He's the chief operating officer.
Okay, well, what you say.
Or we can do a switcheroo and take the planters out from the middle and start parking there again too.
What's that again? I'll take the planters out of the middle. I'll recommend that.
Can you give us the 4 across the street?
Yes.
We got 10 on the council.
Yes.
We got 10 on the council.
I'm sorry, I tried.
I know. I'm just saying.
Just being easy.
We have 3 in front of the building then.
Council Williams, you got any more questions?
Plenty more. Plenty more.
Plenty more.
Revenue control equipment.
Yes.
What is the required ongoing maintenance for that? Because that was a large capital investment.
Sure.
And how long ago? Handful
So
of years?
that was, I think, 2022, because I believe it was one of the first, I remember it happened around the time that ARPA funding became available. So I think that was 21, 22. Again, I haven't been as closely affiliated with garages the last 3 or 4 months, but there have been, at least that has come across my desk, minimal repairs made to the revenue control equipment. I mean, occasionally a bar is malfunctioning or something like that. That's just, I think, normal wear and tear. But, and as somebody who uses the revenue control equipment, when I go to Syracuse Stage and park in Madison Irving, I find it pretty easy to use.
Kind of, again, going to the overall parking strategy.
Yeah,
Kind of
I know.
The shifting ecosystem for parking downtown right
Mm-hmm.
now, do we have a grasp of that? Because we've got 81.
Mm-hmm.
We've got construction related to 81. We have future development. We have parking garages going offline. We've got all these different things happening.
Right.
What's the plan?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's something, a question that both the administration and the council needs to answer, because there is just always this, do we, garages are obviously a major capital expense. They're difficult to maintain in our climate. But so do we offload them and just hang on to maybe one? Or do we hang on to them because, for all the points you just made, parking with 81, is it going to become at a premium, and then we're going to sell these assets and wish we would have hung on to them? And I don't know that any of us alone has that answer, but I can tell you that, the conversation internally includes, Mary Robinson from engineering, who's very concerned about the condition of the garage because it falls on her team to help address the structural issues, but also Eric Ennis, who's obviously wants to be mindful that, having the city owning parking garages is, an asset for us when we're trying to attract folks downtown and to have some control over the parking garages.
It seems like we either need to make a decision one way or the other. We need to get in, invest, double down, make sure that they're, up to market,
Right.
up to par in terms of the capital investments we need, or get out of the game.
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
And kind of the in the middle doesn't seem like it's really benefiting us in any
That's
direction.
fair. That's fair. And I don't know if it's all or nothing, whether it's, there are ones that, ones that are older, and do we hang on to the newer ones, or ones that have more growth potential, whereas other ones we feel like we've kind of hit the ceiling in terms of how many people are ever going to park there, or that serve a specific purpose. Madison Irving, for the most part right now, serves a medical facility, but it's also in an area of a lot of development, of housing that is primarily occupied by students. Center Armory primarily serves the folks that live in the condos above it. And that's a subterranean garage, which has its own, concerns.
You mentioned Madison Irving. It's a funny property because they rely upon it. They depend upon that, the medical, building.
Yes.
But they don't want to own and operate. They want us to do so and, absorb all of those capital costs. What's the conversation there?
Yeah, I don't know, and I know Michael Lehman is here from Assessment, who has had some conversations with the owners of the building. I think their, parking garages are just a funny thing, and so, I don't know if it's fair to say that they have no interest in owning and operating the garage. I think there have been some ongoing conversations, but I think also from the city's side, we need to decide that if we do want to offload that garage, there's going to be more folks that are interested in it than just those folks. So I think in some way the decision almost lies with us, where we say, do we want to get rid of that garage? If so, then we open it up to folks who are interested in it. But I think, to your point, some of that first step starts with us.
There's going to be a time. Look at the lots on North or South Salina Street where there used to be buildings.
Right.
And fire torch them. There's going to be a time when someone's going to say, I want to develop this land.
Right.
Maybe put a
Right.
market or drugstore, because a lot of people live downtown. That's a great advantage. But then, you may lose some parking, but
Right.
so be it.
Yeah. It's always a question of whether or not, the city owning a parking garage on a parcel of land is the best and highest use.
You all set?
I know. It's a lot unresolved. Unresolved, I know.
I'm just looking at my paper, and I feel like I teased out the terms. I've got like average ridership, supply, competitive market, long-term viability, investment, strategy, occupancy, demand, RFP, oversight, working group. It's a big
It is.
picture that we are ignoring.
I don't know that we're ignoring. I think we need to decide collectively decide what is our priority. I think the task seems very overwhelming right now, and so I think both the council and the administration need to decide what's the priority. Is the priority, we're going to look at on-street parking and expanding on-street parking? Are we going to look at, an alternative to a shuttle? Are we going to look at, doing some market analysis of whether or not it makes sense to do garages? It's one of those things where if everything's a priority, then nothing's a priority. And so I think the administration and the council should collectively decide, we're going to prioritize what we're going to do here and focus our energy on that, because it is really overwhelming. There's a lot to it. But I don't want you to think you're the only one who thinks about these things, I promise you. If Connor were here, he would talk about how much he's thinking about them, and I can tell you I've thought a lot about it in the last 7 years. That being said, I don't have the answer for everything.
Well, you might have to consider having underground parking garages.
They are in a very cold climate with a lot of ice and salt.
Yes, I know.
They are quite a challenge. So, you know,
I would go for that.
appreciate the council's support in getting us out of the extra garage game.
All right. Nothing else? We can adjourn for a little bit.
Are you good?
Yeah.
You sure?
Counselors,
I will
got it
call
numbered,
this meeting
don't worry.
adjourned. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second it.
Second.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
We have for 10 minutes.
go
We'll
get,
do that.
go get lunch.